We all know Rivendell. Even if you've only seen the films, you know it. The hidden valley, the sound of waterfalls, the impossible architecture woven into the rock and the trees. The last homely house east of the sea. It's a place of refuge, of healing. It's where the fellowship was formed. It's where the shards of Nazgûl were kept safe for generations, waiting for the hand of the king. Rivendell is a symbol of endurance, a fortress of lore and light that stood for over 3,000 years against the long shadow of Sauron. It survived the wars with Angmar, the treachery of the ringwraiths, the slow decay of the world around it. It survived everything the enemy ever threw at it. But here's the thing nobody talks about. What happened to it after? After the ring was destroyed, after the king returned, after the great victory was won. The story simply moves on. We follow Aragorn to his throne, Sam to his garden, Frodo to the Grey Havens. But Rivendell? It fades from the map. It falls silent. And in that silence is a story that Tolkien himself never fully told. A kind of ghost story scattered in the margins of his world, in his letters and unpublished notes. A story of a victory so total, it cost the victors everything they had fought to protect. Because what finally brought Rivendell down wasn't an army or a dragon or some lingering evil. What finally brought it down was something far quieter and far sadder. It was the sound of a door closing for the last time in an empty house. Have you ever thought about what happens the day after you save the world? What you do when the war that defined your entire existence is finally over? What we're about to uncover is the answer to that question. And it changes everything you thought you knew about winning. To understand the end of Rivendell, you first have to understand its beginning and its purpose. It was never just a city. It was an idea, forged in the fires of defeat, founded by Elrond half-elven in the year 1697 of the Second Age. This was a dark time. The Dark Lord Sauron, wearing a fair guise, had deceived the elven smiths of Eregion. The rings of power had been made, and Sauron had forged the One Ring in secret to control them all. When his deception was revealed, he waged a devastating war. Eregion was annihilated. The gates of Moria were shut. The elves were scattered and broken. Elrond, sent with a relief force that arrived too late, led the survivors into a deep, hidden valley at the feet of the Misty Mountains. He named it Imladris, in the common tongue, Rivendell. From its very inception, Rivendell was a sanctuary. A fortress, yes, but not one of brute stone and high walls. Its defense was its secrecy, its wisdom, and the power of its lord. Elrond was given Vilya, the mightiest of the 3 elven rings, the Ring of Air. And with it, he did something remarkable. He didn't just protect the valley from physical attack, he protected it from time itself. Tolkien tells us that the elven rings could be used for the preservation of what is desired or loved. In Rivendell, Elrond created a pocket of the world where the weariness of the ages was held at bay. The leaves didn't fall in the same way. The seasons were gentler. Memory did not fade into sorrow, but remained sharp, vibrant, and present. It was a place where the glory of the elder days was not just remembered, but felt. It was a living museum, a library of fading light. For 3 millennia, this was its purpose, to preserve the lore of the past, to shelter the dwindling line of the Dúnedain kings, and to stand as a bulwark of wisdom against the encroaching darkness. Every stone, every song, every tapestry in that valley was dedicated to one single, overarching mission: resistance, resisting Sauron, resisting despair, and above all, resisting the relentless, grinding passage of time that was causing the elves to fade from Middle-earth. And then they won. The ring was unmade in the fires of Mount Doom. Sauron was utterly and permanently destroyed. The fourth age of the world began, the age of men. The king returned. The mission was accomplished. And on a grey autumn day, in the year 3021 of the Third Age, Elrond, the master of Rivendell, went to the Grey Havens and took ship for the Undying Lands. With him went Gandalf, Galadriel, Frodo, and Bilbo. It's a scene of profound, bitter-sweet sorrow, the end of an era. But we tend to focus on the people on that ship. We rarely stop to consider what they left behind. When Elrond boarded that white ship, he took Vilya with him, and when the Ring of Air left the shores of Middle-earth, the spell was broken. The preservation field, the magical stasis that had kept Rivendell timeless for 3,000 years, simply switched off. It didn't happen with a crash or a bang. It happened with the turning of the tide. The protection was gone, and for the first time in its long history, the last homely house was left completely exposed. Not to an enemy, but to the world. A world it was no longer a part of. Imagine being an elf who chose to stay behind. Perhaps you were one of Elrond's household, a lore master or a minstrel. You stand on the porch of the main house the morning after the ship has sailed. For centuries, you've woken up to the same light, the same air, the same feeling of gentle, timeless permanence. But this morning, something is different. The air feels thinner. The gold in the afternoon light seems a little less bright. You notice a single brown leaf on a branch of a mallorn tree, something you've rarely seen before. A chill in the wind feels sharper, more real. The weariness of the world, which Vilya had held back for so long, begins to seep into the valley like a slow, silent tide. It's not a curse, it's just reality. The reality the rest of Middle-earth had been living with all along. The most important figures left in Rivendell were Elrond's own sons, the twins Elladan and Elrohir. Their story is one of the great, quiet tragedies lingering in the appendices. As half-elven, they, like their father and their sister Arwen, were granted the choice to be counted among elves and sail into the west, or to be counted among men and accept the gift of mortality. Arwen, for her love of Aragorn, chose mortality. Elrond chose immortality. But the twins, they delayed their choice. The texts are ambiguous as to why. They simply remained in Rivendell after their father's departure. This has led to a lot of speculation. One theory, a particularly sad one, is that they were waiting for their mother. Years before, their mother Celebrian had been captured and tormented by orcs in the Misty Mountains. Though they rescued her, her spirit was broken, and she sailed west to be healed. Perhaps they held out a desperate, impossible hope that with Sauron gone, she might return. But no one returns from the Undying Lands. A more likely reason is tied to their sister. Perhaps they could not bring themselves to leave Middle-earth while Arwen still lived. They were bound by love and family, choosing to linger in a fading world to be near their kin. But whatever the reason, their presence defines the first chapter of Rivendell's decline. They were now the masters of a house whose purpose had vanished. Their father, the lord and founder, was gone. Their sister, for whom they had often ridden to war, was now a mortal queen in a distant land. The great council chambers were silent. The library, filled with the lore of ages, had no great questions of state or strategy to answer. They were wardens of a beautiful, elaborate, and now utterly redundant memory. We can try to imagine their lives in those first few decades of the Fourth Age. They would have continued their patrols, riding out into the wilds of Eriador, for old habits die hard. But the lands were safer now. The power of Angmar was a distant memory. The goblins of the mountains were scattered and leaderless, and the trolls were turning back to stone under the renewed sun. The threats they had spent their lives fighting were gone, so their patrols become less about defense and more about remembrance. They ride past the ruins of old watchtowers, not to check for enemies, but to recall battles fought centuries ago. They are no longer guardians, they are tourists in their own past. Inside Rivendell itself, the change would be even more profound. The number of elves remaining was small. Some had sailed with Elrond, others would have departed in the years that followed. The great feasts in the Hall of Fire would be replaced by quiet meals. The sound of harps and voices singing of the elder days would become rarer, more poignant. A song about the light of the two trees of Valinor sounds different when the path to Valinor is closing forever behind you. It ceases to be history. It becomes a eulogy. The very geography of the place begins to change. Without Vilya's power, the seasons assert themselves with a new harshness. Winters are colder, the snows deeper in the high passes. Summers are hotter and drier. The unique flora of the valley, sustained by Elrond's magic, begins to struggle. Some of the more delicate flowers might wither and die out, replaced by hardier, more common mountain blossoms. The valley doesn't become ugly, it just becomes ordinary. It starts to look like any other valley in the misty mountains. It starts to lose its magic. And for an elf, a being of memory and magic, what could be more heartbreaking than watching the magic literally drain out of your home? Day by day, year by year. Then another figure arrives, a detail buried in the appendices that is so crucial to this story. Celeborn, the Lord of Lorien, husband of Galadriel. After his wife sailed with Elrond, he lingered in his own fading realm for a time. Lorien too was kept timeless by an elven ring, Nenya, wielded by Galadriel. When she left, the golden wood began to fade even faster than Rivendell. The light dimmed, the mallorn leaves fell, and did not grow back as bright. Tolkien writes that Celeborn, growing weary of his empty kingdom, went to Imladris to dwell with the sons of Elrond. Think about what this means. Rivendell becomes a place of refuge, one last time. It becomes a sanctuary not from Sauron, but from loneliness. It becomes a gathering place for the last remnants of the Eldar in Middle-earth, a home for the bereaved. Or Celeborn's arrival would have brought a brief resurgence of life and purpose to the valley. He was one of the wisest and oldest elves left in the world. His presence, along with Elladan and Elrohir, would have made Rivendell the de facto capital of what little was left of elvendom in Eriador. For a time, it might have felt like the old days, three great lords holding council, sharing memories that stretched back to the dawn of the world. But what was there to talk about? The future now belonged to men. The great work was done. Their councils would not be about strategies to defeat the shadow, but about logistics. Who is maintaining the paths to the Grey Havens? How many of our kin are left in the woodlands of Lindon? Their conversations are the conversations of executors settling the estate of a dead world. Let's construct a scene, a moment of pure speculation grounded in the emotional truth of the law. Imagine a quiet evening in the Hall of Fire. A few dozen elves are gathered, the last inhabitants of Rivendell. Celeborn is there, his silver hair catching the light of the hearth. Elladan and Elrohir sit nearby. An elven minstrel takes up a harp and begins to sing. But he doesn't sing of the glorious charge of the Rohirrim or the fall of Barad-dûr. He sings of the city of Gondolin, the hidden elven kingdom destroyed thousands of years before. He sings of its white walls, its fountains, its tragic, beautiful fall. And as he sings, the elves in the hall don't hear a tale of a distant past. They hear their own story. They are living in the last Gondolin. They know how it ends. The song finishes, and the silence that follows is heavier than any note that was played. The fire crackles. Outside, the falls of the Bruinen murmur, a sound that once spoke of life and endurance, but now just feels like the ticking of a clock. This is the new reality of Rivendell, a place saturated with memory, but with no future to make new ones. The world of men, meanwhile, is thriving. Under King Elessar, Aragorn, and Queen Arwen, the reunited kingdom of Gondor and Arnor is entering a golden age. The city of Annúminas is rebuilt in the north, trade routes are re-established, men are having children, building new towns, writing new songs. And to them, Rivendell becomes something between a sacred site and a historical curiosity. Perhaps young lords and scholars from Minas Tirith would make a pilgrimage to the Hidden Valley, to see the last of the Eldar, to hear tales of the elder days from those who lived them. They would be welcomed, of course, but there would be an invisible wall between them. The elves of Rivendell are living relics. The men are the inheritors of the world. The visitors would look upon the elves with awe and reverence, but also with a kind of pity. They are looking at the past, and the elves would look back at them, seeing the vibrant, bustling, chaotic future that has no place for them. This state of affairs, this long, slow twilight, could not last forever. An elf can endure sorrow and loss for a very long time, but they can't endure meaninglessness. The core purpose of their existence in Middle-earth was to resist the shadow and preserve the light. With the shadow gone, their light was no longer needed. It was beautiful, but obsolete. The final chapter of Rivendell is the story of its final emptying. The text tells us that at some point, Elladan and Elrohir finally made their choice. We are not told what it was. It's one of Tolkien's most painful ambiguities. Did they at last grow weary of their fading home and sail into the west to be with their father? Or did they, like their sister, choose mortality and live out their days in Middle-earth, eventually dying as men? Most scholars lean towards the former, that they eventually took the path to the Grey Havens. Their departure would have been the true death knell for Rivendell. They were the anchors, the sons of the founder. When they left, the last link to Elrond's original vision was broken. After them, Celeborn remained for a time. Tolkien says he was perhaps the last of the great Eldar to linger. Imagine him, the last giant in a land of smaller beings. Walking through the empty halls, the library where he once conferred with Elrond and Gandalf, now thick with dust. The memory of his wife Galadriel, of his daughter Celebrian, of his granddaughter Arwen, all gone from this world. He would have been utterly, profoundly alone. And so, eventually, he too makes his way to the Grey Havens and takes the last ship. The lore is unclear on the exact timeline, but it happens sometime after the death of Arwen in the year 121 of the Fourth Age. After Celeborn, who was left? A handful of unnamed elves. The population would dwindle one by one, family by family, taking the long road west to the sea. Each departure would make the valley quieter, emptier. The last feast is held. The last song is sung. Until one day there is only one left. One single elf, walking through the silent courtyards, past the empty guest rooms where hobbits and dwarves and future kings once slept. What does that last elf do? Do they carefully shutter the windows and bar the doors, as if expecting a future owner? No, that's a mortal way of thinking. An elf would know this isn't a pause, it's an ending. They would likely walk through the house one last time, touching the carved pillars, looking at the faded tapestries. They would stand on the bridge and listen to the falls. And then they would turn and walk away, down the path that leads out of the valley, and they would not look back. This is the core insight. Rivendell was not conquered. It was not destroyed by orcs or sacked by goblins. It was abandoned. Its purpose was so completely and totally fulfilled that it rendered itself obsolete. The victory over Sauron wasn't a victory for Rivendell. It was the trigger for its dissolution. It was built to be a haven in a world at war. And when peace came, a true, lasting peace, it no longer had a reason to exist. Its perfection was contingent on the imperfection of the world outside. It needed the shadow to define its own light. When the shadow was gone, the light had nothing to push against, and it simply dissipated into the common light of day. It's a staggering, paradoxical thought. Winning was the thing that killed it. And here we must pivot. Because this story, this slow, quiet unraveling of a magical place, isn't just about elves and rings of power. It's a deeply human story about the terrifying silence that follows the achievement of a great purpose. What happens to the soldier the day the war ends? He has spent years defining himself through struggle, discipline, and comradeship. And suddenly, it's gone. He is returned to a world that has moved on, a world that doesn't understand the language of his experience. He is haunted by the meaning he has lost. What about the scientist who spends their entire life working to solve a single problem, to find a cure or prove a theorem? The day they succeed is a day of triumph, yes. But the morning after, they wake up to a terrifying question. What now? The struggle that gave their life shape and direction is over. The very thing they fought to end was the thing that gave them their identity. We see this everywhere. The parent who dedicates 2 decades to raising their children and then comes home to a silent, empty house. The activist who fights for a piece of legislation for years, and the day it passes, feels a strange, hollow melancholy alongside the joy. The end of a great project, even a successful one, is a kind of death. You have to mourn the person you were while you were fighting for it. You have to learn to live in the world you created, a world that no longer requires that version of you to exist. Rivendell is the physical embodiment of that feeling. It is a monument to a finished task, beautiful, perfect, and frozen in the amber of a purpose that has passed. Its tragedy is not that it fell, but that it didn't. It was simply left behind by the flow of time it had so long resisted. Imagine, a century or two into the Fourth Age, a group of explorers, perhaps great-great-grandchildren of the men Aragorn once led, hear the legends of the hidden valley of Imladris. They search for it, and after a long journey, they find it. They come over the high pass and look down. And it's all still there. The graceful bridges, the elegant roofs, the waterfalls. It doesn't look like a ruin. From a distance, it looks perfect, as if the elves had just stepped out for a walk. But as they get closer, they feel the silence. It's a silence deeper than just an absence of people. It's an absence of life, of intent. They walk into the great hall. The tables and chairs are still there, covered in a thick, soft layer of dust and moss. A harp stands in a corner, its strings long since broken, furred with green. In the library, scrolls lie on tables, their ink faded to ghost-like traces, the parchment slowly turning back into pulp and leaf matter. The wind whistles through the open colonnades. It is not a haunted place. There are no ghosts here. A ghost is a memory that won't let go. Rivendell is a memory that everyone has let go of. It is simply an empty place, and that is so much worse. A ruin tells a story of destruction. An empty house tells a story of departure, of a love and a life that simply moved on and went somewhere else. It is the architecture of absence. In the end, Tolkien himself seems to have found this story too painful to fully chronicle. He gives us the facts in his appendices, the cold data of who left and when. But he never wrote the scene. He never showed us the last elf walking away, perhaps because he understood this type of sadness so intimately. His entire legendarium is saturated with what he called the long defeat. The idea that even victory is tinged with loss, that every step forward leaves something beautiful behind. He fought in the trenches of World War I. He saw a world of old certainties and traditions utterly destroyed, replaced by something new and industrial and strange. He knew what it was to win a war and lose a world. Rivendell is his elegy for that feeling. He gave us the glorious triumph, the coronation of the king, the scouring of the Shire. But he knew, with the deep, sorrowful wisdom that defines his work, that the peace that followed would have its own quiet, inconsolable heartbreak. We started with the image of the last homely house, a place of refuge, of light, of seemingly eternal summer. But its story ends there, in that silent, empty valley. The waterfalls are still sounding, the river is still flowing, the stars are still sharp and bright overhead. But there is no one left to see them, no one left to hear the water or sing to the stars. It was the last homely house, a bastion against the fading of the world. And then, its work done, it simply faded with it. It became, in the end, just a house, a beautiful, empty house in a valley full of echoes, waiting for the mountains to slowly, over thousands of years, grind it back into dust. Some things are not defeated by a great evil. They are simply outlasted by time. And the most profound endings aren't the loud, fiery cataclysms of war. They are the quiet, unnoticed moments when the last person in the room turns off the light, closes the door, and walks away, leaving nothing behind but the silence.